Daniel never believed in love at first sight. He thought it was something people made up in movies to sell tickets. But that changed on a random Thursday evening in April 2019. His company was throwing one of those fancy annual parties that he usually tried to avoid. You know the type. Everyone dressed up making small talk, pretending to enjoy classical music while drinking expensive wine they couldn't normally afford. He was standing near the balcony, away from the crowd, just trying to get through the evening. That's when he saw her. Maya was holding a camera, moving through the room like she belonged to a different world. She wasn't there as a guest. She was the photographer they'd hired to capture the event, but something about the way she worked caught his attention. She wasn't just snapping random photos. She was watching people, waiting for real moments, genuine smiles, authentic interactions. Their eyes met when she lowered her camera for a moment. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, but Daniel felt something shift inside him. He couldn't explain it then, and honestly, he still can't explain it now. It was like recognizing someone you've never met before. He spent the next 20 minutes building up the courage to talk to her. What would he even say? He rehearsed lines in his head, rejected them all, then finally just walked over during her break. She was reviewing photos on her camera screen, a slight smile on her face. "Those any good?" he asked. "Smooth, right?" "Not really, but it worked." She looked up and her smile grew wider. "Some of them. People are more interesting when they don't know they're being watched." They started talking and time just disappeared. Maya told him about her work, how she'd quit a stable marketing job 2 years ago to chase her dream of becoming a photographer. She talked about capturing truth in images, about finding beauty in ordinary moments. Daniel found himself telling her things he rarely shared with anyone. His frustrations with his job, his fear that he was living someone else's version of success, his secret dream of designing homes that actually meant something to people. Before he knew it, the party was ending. People were saying their goodbyes, putting on coats, calling cars. Daniel felt panic rising in his chest. He couldn't let her just walk away. "Can I get your number?" he asked, trying to sound casual while his heart was racing. Maya handed him her business card. "Call me," she said simply. "I'd like to continue this conversation." He called her the next day. Then they met for coffee that weekend. Coffee turned into dinner. Dinner turned into a walk through the city that lasted until midnight. Within weeks, they were seeing each other almost every day. Maya brought something into Daniel's life that he didn't know was missing. She was spontaneous in a way that terrified and excited him. One random Tuesday, she showed up at his office at 6 p.m. with 2 packed bags. "We're going to the coast," she announced. "Right now. I already called your boss and told him you have a family emergency." Daniel stared at her. "You did what?" "I'm kidding about calling your boss. But we are going. Come on, when's the last time you did something just because you wanted to?" He couldn't remember. So they went. They drove 3 hours, sang terrible karaoke to old songs, and watched the sunrise over the ocean while eating gas station sandwiches. It was perfect. Maya taught him to see the world differently. She'd stop in the middle of the street to photograph a puddle reflecting the sky. She'd talk to strangers at coffee shops and learn their life stories. She made everything feel like an adventure, even grocery shopping. Daniel realized he'd been living his life on autopilot for years. Wake up, go to work, come home, watch TV, sleep, repeat. Maya shook him awake. With her, every day felt full of possibility. He helped her too, though it took him a while to see it. Maya was brilliant and passionate, but she was also scattered. She'd forget to send invoices to clients, miss deadlines because she was chasing the perfect shot, survive on crackers and cheese because she forgot to go grocery shopping. Daniel brought structure to her chaos. He helped her set up a proper business system, reminded her to eat actual meals, made sure her bills got paid on time. They balanced each other. She pushed him to live more. He helped her build a sustainable life. Friends started calling them the perfect couple, and for a while it really felt that way. Summer turned to autumn. The leaves changed colors, and Daniel realized he was in love. Actually, truly, deeply in love. He'd dated before, had relationships that lasted months or even years, but this was different. Maya wasn't just someone he enjoyed spending time with. She felt like home. One October evening, they were lying on a blanket in his living room, too lazy to sit on the actual couch. She was editing photos on her laptop, and he was sketching design ideas in his notebook. Neither of them was talking, but the silence felt comfortable, natural. I love you, he said suddenly, surprising himself. Maya looked up from her screen. Her eyes were soft and a smile played at the corners of her mouth. I love you too, she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I have for a while now. That night, Daniel felt something he'd spent years searching for, a sense of being exactly where he was supposed to be, with exactly the right person. Everything in his life finally made sense. He had no idea that in just a few months everything would start falling apart. The new year arrived with champagne and promises. Daniel and Maya celebrated 2020 like everyone else, hopeful, excited, completely unaware of what was coming. Maya had been working toward something big for years, and in January it finally happened. She got offered a 6-month assignment in South America, photographing indigenous communities for a major magazine. It was the kind of opportunity photographers dream about their entire careers. Daniel remembered the day she told him. They were having breakfast at their favorite diner when she got the email. She screamed so loud that everyone in the restaurant looked over. She was crying happy tears, showing him the email over and over like she couldn't believe it was real. This is it, she kept saying. This is everything I've worked for. Daniel hugged her, told her how proud he was, and he meant it. But underneath the excitement, he felt something else, a cold knot of fear in his stomach. 6 months. She'd be gone for 6 months, and South America was far, really far. They talked about it that night lying in bed. Maya promised they'd make it work. They'd video call every day. She'd be back before he knew it. Nothing would change between them. Daniel wanted to believe her. He tried to believe her. But he couldn't shake the feeling that once she left, she might not come back. Not because she didn't love him, but because the world she was stepping into was so much bigger than the life they'd built together. Then March happened. The virus, lockdowns, everything shut down overnight. Maya's trip was postponed indefinitely. At first, they thought it would just be a few weeks. Then weeks turned into months. Maya ended up moving into Daniel's apartment because it didn't make sense to pay rent on 2 places when no one could go anywhere anyway. Living together seemed like an adventure at first. They cooked elaborate meals, had movie marathons, made plans for all the things they'd do when the world opened back up. But as weeks stretched into months, the small apartment started feeling smaller. The adventure started feeling like a trap. Maya couldn't work the way she used to. No events to photograph, no portraits to take, no travel opportunities. She tried doing virtual projects, but it wasn't the same. Daniel watched her become restless like a bird kept in a cage. She'd pace around the apartment, pick up her camera and put it down again, stare out the window for hours. Daniel was working from home too, and the stress was getting to him. Video calls all day, deadlines piling up, living and working in the same space with no escape. He started becoming overprotective about everything. He worried constantly about Maya going outside, about groceries they ordered, about every cough or sneeze. You don't need to go to the store, he'd say. We can get everything delivered. I just need to walk around the block, Maya would argue. I'm going crazy in here. It's not safe. Just wait a few more days. These conversations started happening more and more. Daniel thought he was protecting her. Maya felt like she was suffocating. The apartment that once felt cozy now felt like it was closing in on them. They could never escape each other, never have space to breathe. The fight started small. Dishes left in the sink, different sleep schedules. One person wanting the window open, the other wanting it closed. But these small things were never really about dishes or windows. They were about something deeper. 2 people who loved each other trying to fit into a space that was suddenly too small for both their dreams. By summer, they were arguing almost every day. Maya accused Daniel of being controlling, of not understanding her need for freedom and creative expression. Daniel felt like he was doing everything to make her happy, but nothing was ever enough. He'd given her space in his home, supported her career, worried about her safety, and somehow he was the bad guy. One night in November, they had the worst fight yet. Daniel couldn't even remember what started it. Something about dinner maybe, or plans for the weekend, but it escalated fast. Voices raised, words thrown like weapons. Things they'd been holding back for months came pouring out. You want to control everything, Maya said, tears streaming down her face. You don't want a partner. You want someone who'll just fit into your perfect little plan. That's not fair, Daniel shot back. I've done nothing but support you. I've rearranged my entire life for you. I never asked you to do that. I never asked you to sacrifice anything. You did that yourself, and now you're making me feel guilty for it." The silence that followed was worse than the shouting. They stood on opposite sides of the apartment, both breathing hard, both realizing that something fundamental had broken between them. Maya grabbed a blanket and pillow and slept on the couch that night. Daniel lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how they'd gotten here. December brought news that travel restrictions were easing. Maya's South America project was back on. They could reschedule for early 2021. Daniel knew before she said anything what she was thinking. He could see it in her eyes, in the way she held the email like it was a lifeline. "I want to go," she said quietly. "I know," Daniel replied. They sat down to talk about it properly. Daniel asked her to wait, to postpone again, to give them time to fix what was broken. Maya said she couldn't keep putting her life on hold, that she'd waited long enough. Back and forth they went, trying to find a compromise that didn't exist. "Come with me," Maya suggested at one point. "You know I can't. My job, my life, everything is here. And my dreams are there." Neither of them wanted to give an ultimatum, but that's what it became anyway. Stay or go, choose love or choose dreams. As if those two things should ever be opposites. They both said things they didn't mean, things they'd regret later. When you're hurt and scared, words become weapons you can't take back. January 2021 arrived cold and gray. Maya left on a Tuesday morning. Daniel drove her to the airport, and they barely spoke during the drive. What was left to say? They'd said it all in the previous weeks, the arguments, the tears, the desperate attempts to find a solution that would make both of them happy. At the airport, they hugged for a long time. Maya was crying. Daniel felt numb, like his emotions had frozen over to protect him from the pain. They promised to try long distance, daily video calls, making it work. But even as they said these things, they both knew the truth. They were already over. This was just the slow, painful ending. The first few weeks, they kept their promise. Video calls every evening, telling each other about their days. But the conversations felt forced. Maya was in this incredible new world, meeting amazing people, taking photos that made Daniel's heart ache with how beautiful they were. And Daniel was still in the same apartment, doing the same work, living the same life. They had less and less to talk about. By March, the calls became shorter, less frequent. Sometimes they'd miss days without really meaning to. Daniel could feel her slipping away, and he didn't know how to hold on without pulling too tight. Then one evening, Maya asked if they could talk about something serious. Daniel's stomach dropped before she even started speaking. She told him she'd met someone. Nothing serious, she said. Just a local photographer who'd been helping her navigate the communities. They'd spent time together. There had been a connection. She hadn't meant for it to happen, but it did. She was so sorry. She thought she should be honest. Daniel sat there, phone in hand, watching her face on the screen as she explained. He felt something inside him shatter. Not dramatically like glass breaking, more quietly like ice cracking on a frozen lake. He heard himself say it was okay, that he appreciated her honesty, that they should probably end things officially. His voice sounded calm, almost detached, like it belonged to someone else. They ended the call. Daniel sat on his couch in the dark apartment for hours. He didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't throw anything. He just sat there, feeling the weight of her absence settle into his bones. The person who had felt like his entire future was now just his past. The next months were a blur. Daniel functioned, but he wasn't really living. He got up, worked, ate because he had to, slept when exhaustion forced him. Friends called to check on him. He told them he was fine. He learned that fine was a word people used when they didn't want to explain how they really felt. He tried to erase her from his life. He deleted her contact information, archived their messages, removed photos from his phone. But he couldn't bring himself to permanently delete anything. Late at night, when he couldn't sleep, he'd restore her number just to look at it, then delete it again before morning. His friends tried to help. They set him up on dates with nice women who smiled at him across restaurant tables. He went through the motions, asked questions, laughed at jokes, paid for dinner. But every conversation felt like he was reading from a script. None of these women were her. None of them made him feel the way Maya did. He downloaded dating apps, swiped through faces of strangers. Sometimes he matched with someone. Sometimes they'd chat. Once or twice he even met up with them. But sitting across from these women, all he could think about was Maya, the way she'd laugh at his terrible jokes, the way she'd steal food off his plate, the way she'd fall asleep during movies and then deny it when he woke her up. His apartment became a museum of memories he couldn't escape. That was the corner where they'd danced at 2 a.m. to old jazz music. That was the couch where they'd spent entire Sundays reading books, feet tangled together. That was the kitchen where she'd attempted to cook dinner and nearly set off the fire alarm. Every room whispered her name. At night, Daniel still reached for her. Half asleep, his hand would slide across the bed, searching for her warmth. Every time he'd wake fully when he found only empty space and cold sheets. Some mornings he'd wake up and forget for a beautiful, painful moment that she was gone. Then reality would crash back and he'd have to lose her all over again. He tried everything people suggested. Meditation apps that promised inner peace, self-help books about moving on, therapy sessions where he talked in circles about the same pain, exercise routines to tire himself out, new hobbies to distract his mind. Nothing worked. Nothing filled the space she'd left behind. Time moved forward because that's what time does. Days became weeks, became months. Daniel got better at pretending. He smiled at work, made jokes with friends, acted like a person who was healing. But inside, he was stuck in that moment at the airport, watching her walk away. 2 years passed. It was 2023 now, and Daniel had rebuilt his life. On paper, everything looked good. He'd gotten a promotion at work, moved to a new apartment to escape the memories, made new friends who didn't know about Maya. To anyone looking from outside, he seemed like someone who'd moved on. But inside, he was still carrying her. Maya lived in the small moments he couldn't control. A woman at the coffee shop would laugh and his heart would skip because it sounded like her. He'd catch a scent of the perfume she used to wear, and suddenly he was back in his old apartment watching her get ready for a date night. A song would play in the grocery store, and he'd remember dancing with her in his kitchen. His friends stopped asking about her. They thought enough time had passed. They'd say things like, "You've moved on so well," or "I'm proud of how far you've come." Daniel would smile and agree because that's what you're supposed to do. But he wanted to scream that you can't just decide to forget someone who rewrote your understanding of love. You can't will yourself to stop missing someone who made you feel truly alive. Then one random afternoon in May, Daniel was scrolling through social media, something he rarely did anymore. A mutual friend had posted photos from an art gallery opening, and there in the background of one photo was Maya. She was back in the United States, living in Portland, which was only 3 hours away. Daniel stared at the photo for so long his phone screen went dark. He turned it back on, zoomed in, studied her face. She looked different. Her hair was shorter. She dressed differently. But it was definitely her. He felt like he'd been punched in the chest. Over the following weeks, he became somewhat obsessed with finding information. Not in a creepy way, at least he told himself that. But he'd check her photographer page more often than he'd admit. She was doing well. Really well. Gallery shows. Published work. Everything she'd dreamed of. She looked happy in the photos. Settled. Like she'd found exactly what she was looking for. Daniel typed out messages to her dozens of times. Simple ones. "Hey, heard you're back in town?" Delete. "How have you been?" Delete. "I've been thinking about you." Delete, delete, delete. What could he possibly say? What right did he have to re-enter her life when she'd clearly moved forward? Then one evening in August, Daniel attended an art exhibition downtown. He wasn't even sure why he went. A colleague mentioned it and he had nothing else to do. He walked through the gallery looking at photographs he didn't really see, drinking wine he didn't really taste. And then he saw it. One of Maya's photographs.
Hanging on the wall.
And it wasn't from her recent work. It was from their time together. A candid shot of his hands holding a pencil, sketching something at his desk. He remembered that day. They'd been together maybe 4 months. She'd taken the photo without him noticing. He'd found out later and asked her to delete it, embarrassed by how vulnerable he looked, completely absorbed in his work. But she hadn't deleted it. She'd kept it. And now here it was, printed large, displayed in a public gallery for everyone to see. The caption read simply, "Concentration 2019. Daniel stood in front of that photograph for over an hour. People walked past him, looked at the image, moved on. But he couldn't move. Every detail of that day came flooding back. What they'd talked about, what they'd eaten for lunch, the way she'd kissed him afterward and said, "You're beautiful when you're creating something." A gallery worker eventually approached him. "Powerful piece, isn't it?" she said kindly. "The photographer really captures intimacy in the everyday." Daniel nodded, not trusting himself to speak. He left the gallery feeling like he'd been torn open all over again. All the healing he thought he'd done suddenly felt like a thin bandage over a wound that had never really closed. At a dinner party the following week, Daniel ran into their mutual friend, the one who'd posted those photos. They chatted about meaningless things until Daniel couldn't hold back anymore. "Does Maya ever mention me?" he asked, trying to sound casual. The friend looked uncomfortable. "Sometimes," she admitted. "She asks how you're doing. Seems to genuinely care." That information haunted Daniel for days. She asked about him. She cared. What did that mean? Was it just polite interest, or did she think about him the way he thought about her? Did she lie awake at night remembering their inside jokes? Did she hear songs that made her cry because they reminded her of him? The rational part of Daniel's brain told him to let it go. They'd ended for real reasons. Time and distance had done what they needed to do. Reaching out would just reopen old wounds. But the irrational part, the part that still loved her desperately, started building fantasies. Maybe enough time had passed. Maybe they'd both grown. Maybe they could try again. October 2024. Daniel sat in his car outside the coffee shop, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe. It had taken him weeks to work up the courage to send that message. Just a simple text, "Hey, I heard you're in Portland now. Any chance you'd want to meet for coffee? I'd like to see you." Maya had responded within an hour. "I'd like that too. How about Saturday?" Now it was Saturday, and Daniel was terrifying himself with possibilities. What if she'd changed completely? What if they had nothing to say to each other? What if she brought the person she was with now? What if seeing her made everything worse instead of better? He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror one more time, then forced himself to get out of the car. The coffee shop was small, quiet, the kind of place where people came to actually talk rather than scroll on their phones. He spotted her immediately. She was sitting in the corner holding a cup of tea, staring out the window. When she saw him, her face lit up with a smile that made his heart break and heal at the same time. "Hi," she said, standing up to hug him. The embrace was brief but warm. "Hi," Daniel replied, his voice steadier than he felt. They sat down, and for the first few minutes, the conversation was surface level. How was Portland? How was work? The weather of all things. They were dancing around the real conversation, both of them knowing it was coming but neither wanting to start it. Finally, Daniel took a breath and decided to be honest. "I never really moved on," he said quietly. "From you, I mean." "I tried, I really did, but you've been with me in every moment since you left. I see you everywhere." Maya's eyes filled with tears. She reached across the table and took his hand. "I think about you all the time," she admitted. "There were so many moments in Peru when something amazing would happen, and my first thought would be, I wish Daniel was here to see this. You were supposed to be part of that adventure." For a moment, Daniel felt hope bloom in his chest. Maybe this was it. Maybe they were going to find their way back to each other. But then Maya pulled her hand back and wiped her eyes. "But Daniel," she continued, her voice gentle but firm, "I had to leave. I loved you so much it was swallowing who I was. And I think you loved me in a way that needed me to stay small. To fit into your life rather than building something together." Daniel wanted to argue, to defend himself. But as she explained, he started to hear the truth in her words. He'd loved her desperately, completely, but his love had been laced with fear. Fear of losing her, fear of not being enough, and that fear had made him hold on too tight. He'd wanted to protect her, to keep her close, to make sure she was safe. But what Maya had needed was someone who could let her fly, even if it meant flying away from him. "I wanted you to choose me over your dreams," Daniel said slowly, realization dawning. "I thought love meant being each other's priority above everything else. And I needed someone who understood that my dreams weren't separate from my love for you," Maya replied. "That I could love you and still need to become who I was meant to be." They talked for hours. The coffee shop started to fill up with the evening crowd, and they barely noticed. They cried together, laughed about good memories, apologized for the ways they'd hurt each other. It wasn't the reunion Daniel had imagined, but it was something more valuable. It was honest. Maya told him about her life now. She was seeing someone in Portland, another artist who understood her need for creative space. They had separate apartments. They encouraged each other's work. It was healthy in ways her relationship with Daniel hadn't been, and hearing that hurt. But Daniel was glad for her. Daniel talked about his life too. The therapy. The struggles. The slow process of learning to be happy alone. Maya listened without judgment, without trying to fix anything, just listened. As the sun began to set, they knew their time was ending. They stood to leave, and Maya hugged him tightly. "Thank you," she whispered, "for loving me the way you could. It taught me what I needed to find, both in myself and in a partner." "Thank you for teaching me what love should feel like," Daniel replied. "Even if we couldn't make it work, I'm grateful it happened." They walked out together and stood on the sidewalk for a moment. "Will you be okay?" Maya asked. Daniel thought about it honestly. "Yeah," he said, and for the first time he believed it. "I will be." They hugged one more time, then walked in different directions. Daniel got in his car and sat there for a while, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. His chest felt different. Not light exactly, but less heavy, like he'd been carrying a boulder and had finally set it down. He drove home slowly, letting his mind wander through memories. Maya would always be part of his story. Her name would still appear in his thoughts in moments of nostalgia, in songs that caught him off guard. But now, instead of feeling like a wound that wouldn't heal, it felt like a scar, proof that he'd survived something difficult and come through changed. That night, lying in bed, Daniel whispered her name one last time. Maya. Not to hold on, but to acknowledge what she'd meant, to honor what they'd shared, and then finally to truly let go. He realized something profound. Some people come into your life not to stay forever, but to change you forever. They teach you about yourself, about love, about who you want to become, and sometimes the greatest gift they give you is the space to grow into the person you're meant to be, even if that means growing apart. Daniel fell asleep that night without reaching for the empty space beside him, and when he woke up the next morning, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, not yet, but possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, he could learn to love again, differently this time, better this time. With all the lessons Maya had taught him about holding on and letting go, her name would still whisper through his life in quiet moments. But now those whispers felt less like pain and more like gratitude. She had been his greatest love and his greatest teacher, and that was enough.